Well, before I start today, I'm going to take a moment and take some editorial liberties, and well, I'm a person who works in editorial, so I hope you'll allow that. But I just wanted to point out Jenni Evelyn is here today. Tom Evelyn, her husband, was the longtime overseer of the cans, and I think that's the proper term. And Jenni is a rock star. Jenni, thank you for being here so much. 10 years ago, last month, Mike Gundy, the football coach at Oklahoma State, turned a post-game press conference on its head. Even though his team had just won a really big game, he was angry. So angry, in fact, that he raised his voice, pointed his fingers, and ranted and raved. He was fuming about a column that ran that morning in a local newspaper. He said it was false. He even said it was garbage. His rant became one of the most memorable tirades in sports history, and you can Google it right now and find it. Well, maybe not right now. I mean, maybe wait till Cameron gets up here and Google it then or something. But you've no doubt heard the most memorable punchline from that rant. I'm a man. I'm 40. The rant was long, the rant was personal, and if you didn't know, the rant was directed at me. Now, there are a lot of things that I could tell you about that day, and truth be told, there's been a lot written and said about the rant here recently because this is the 10th anniversary of it, and also Mike celebrated his 50th birthday here recently, so while he may very well still be a man, he no longer is 40. At my newspaper, The Oklahoman, which was my employer at the time of the rant and is still my employer, yay, we did some things on Mike Gundy's birthday and on the anniversary of the rant. But really, it's been interesting for me to watch what others have done, their storylines, their takes, their analysis. And one of the things that I've noticed is this. I'm not really that central to the story. Sometimes my name isn't even used. Many stories refer to a reporter, or maybe even a columnist, but if my name's used, there's really not a ton written or said about me. And frankly, that is magnificent. It warms my heart even. And I don't want you to misunderstand when I say that, though, because I'm not saying that because I want to distance myself from what I wrote 10 years ago. Let me tell you a little bit about the column that sparked the rant. It was about a change that Oklahoma State had made at quarterback. And if you know anything about football, you know that position is a pretty big deal. And it was made an even bigger deal at Oklahoma State by the fact that the Cowboys had decided to bench a guy who had been, and really still is, one of the most high-profile recruits in program history. But when OSU coaches were asked publicly about why the change was being made from one starter to another, their explanations just weren't lining up with what our reporters knew to be true. They said that the original starter had been hurt, but he wasn't really hurt. So there was more to this story than what they were saying. And I really believe with every fiber of my being that what I wrote 10 years ago was not only accurate, but was also necessary for our coverage of Oklahoma State. Their fans wanted to know why their team was going from a ballyhoo quarterback to a guy who had largely been under the radar, and with the help of our beat writers, that column provided some answers. The original starter just wasn't the leader that the coaches wanted, and the new guy was, and it turns out in retrospect, the change was a great move. The new guy became one of the best quarterbacks, one of the most successful quarterbacks, and most beloved players of all time at OSU. But no one knew at the time how things would go. And instead, our readers were trying to figure out why the change had been made. And again, my column helped put some of the pieces of that puzzle together. So again, the reason that I'm happy my name and my role in the rant has faded is not because I want to disassociate myself from what I wrote. I'm happy about that because I believe it's a reflection of how I handled the whole situation. I'm not going to lie to you and say that handling the fallout was easy at all. It was very, very difficult. In the days that followed, all sorts of local and national media wanted to talk to me. You know, when the rant happened, YouTube was really only a couple years old, and I don't know this for certain, but I'm going to guess the rant may have been one of the first videos that truly went viral on YouTube. It was really everywhere, and weirdly for me, so was I. SportsCenter, Good Morning America, USA Today, on and on. The whole thing was all over the place. I only did a couple of interviews because after a few days, my editors decided that we weren't going to discuss the rant anymore. It wasn't because we didn't stand by what had been written. I actually asked Coach Gundy at his weekly press conference a few days after the rant to outline any factual errors in the column. He said that there were false statements in the column, and we have a policy at our newspaper of correcting errors that appear in the newspaper. So I gave him the chance to provide me a list of corrections so that I could do that in the newspaper, but he didn't offer any corrections. So after writing about that, I didn't write another word about the rant until last month. That's 10 years. I can't say that I didn't casually throw in a catchphrase from the rant from time to time. That ain't true was a favorite one, and it occasionally slipped into something that I might have written, but largely I stayed true to the decision that my editors made not to talk about the rant anymore. What we did, and I say we because I felt very much a part of a team, very much supported by the newsroom in the days after the rant, we did what we did because we had work to do. We had some really big teams and some really big things going on in our sports world that fall, and we just had to get on about the business of covering those teams, those sports, those games. We had to write stories and columns, we had to do videos and blogs, and we had to edit and design, and that's what we did. Even though we stopped talking and writing about the rant, it doesn't mean everyone else did, of course. For weeks and maybe even longer, I received emails about the whole thing, and I have to admit that while I believe reader feedback is very important in what we do, I didn't read all of those emails, and to this day, I still haven't read some of them. But there were some times during that whole thing, the emails were coming in my inbox so fast, it felt like Super Bowl night on TweetDeck. It was just coming one after another after another. I couldn't even keep up. So even though I didn't read every word of every email, I know that a lot of them were critical. Some were angry, some were furious, and there were even a few that were pretty vile. There were some funny ones, or at least I thought they were funny, and there were people telling me things like I needed to go back in the kitchen and make some cookies, which, you know, is a joke to them because I'm not the one in my house that does anything good in the kitchen. That's my husband that does all the cooking, so joke's on them. But there were also emails that, you know, that were degrading. They degraded me, they threatened me, and those are things that I really wouldn't wish on anyone, no matter the business. And those sorts of things, unfortunately, are something I have to deal with from time to time. Even though this is 2017, or maybe it's because it's 2017 and the media is under attack these days from the highest elected positions to the lowest common denominators, the media has become a target. Big picture, I believe it's because right now people in our country are fearful, scared, mad, and lots of times they take that out on reporters. Then in my situation, you add in the fact that I'm a woman telling people how they should feel about sports. Well, that only adds to some people's fears. I truly believe that a lot of the vitriol leveled at women like me in sports media comes from men who, frankly, are scared. Scared that one more of their areas is being taken away from them, and scared that women writing and talking and pontificating about sports is a sign that their control is slipping away. I'm all for people disagreeing with me. If they have a different opinion than I do, that's great. If they see something another way than I do, okay, let's talk about it. But when people see difference of opinion as an opportunity to attack me or anyone else personally, that's not okay. But here's the thing I've decided, is I get to choose how those things affect me. By the way, the mute button on Twitter, wonderful, beautiful function. Use it often, please, by all means. But there was still a time when ugly comments, hurtful emails, those did affected me a lot. They made me wonder, am I any good at what I do? Am I qualified to do this job? And then there's the really bad one, am I in this position just because I'm a woman? You know, I thought about those things, but then I also came to the point where I realized that I have a lot of coworkers who like what I do, and same for other people in the business, respected folks in sports media. They like my writing, they like my ideas. So I asked myself, why would I allow the words of a reader or two to carry more weight than the words of those people in the business? Why would the criticism of some carry more weight than another? You know, it's human nature, I suppose. I mean, how many times have we heard athletes and coaches say they remember the losses way more than the wins? And I suppose it's the same sort of thing with criticism and praise. Which brings us back to the rant. That criticism was tough. The criticism in that moment, the criticism that followed, but I got to decide how that was going to affect me and how I was going to react. I didn't lambaste Mike Gundy, and I didn't crucify OSU. I didn't take a flamethrower to everyone and everything who came after me. You know, I know that approach isn't the way that most people want to do business these days. Most people want to fight fire with fire. And you know, I believe there's a time to fight with fire. If you Google my name, and again, wait until Cameron gets up here. Google my name in Baylor, you'll see that since the news of their sexual assault scandal broke, you'll see that I'm not opposed to fighting for what I think is right. But in the aftermath of the rant, I thought that the right thing to do was to get on about the business of doing my job. I had games to cover, I had columns to write, and wallowing in what had happened wasn't going to do anyone any good, not our readers, not our newspaper, and certainly not me. One of my good friends, who just happens to be one of my editors, tells me regularly that I have the thickest skin of anyone he's ever known. And I don't know about that, but here's what I do know. My job comes with pressure and stress, and there's pressure and stress in a lot of jobs, but there's real pressure and stress in a lot of places in this world. I mean, try to be a Kansas farmer in the 1980s when prices were tanking and family farms were drying up. I saw my parents go through that. So I know what pressure and stress in your job really looks like. I'm just a sports columnist. I always remember that there are way bigger issues in the world than the ones I'm facing. Finding ways to continually get that perspective, that's really vital to me. You know, I've tutored in an inner city school, driven a van for an after-school program, taught kids in a Sunday school class, and that really provides that perspective. Now, I can't tell you how to handle tough situations that are going to come your way, but if you're in the media for very long, you're going to face tough situations. I know it's difficult right now for a lot of you who are young in this room to think about anything other than your career. You want to get started, you want to sell out to the job. You know, I was you thinking that way once upon a time. But I found that being able to handle critical emails, mean tweets, and yes, maybe even that occasional post-game rant that goes viral, knowing who you are and what matters to you is absolutely crucial. So it's not about thick skin. I think it's about being comfortable in the skin you have. Thank you, guys.